qualification, due diligence, and underwriting of the projects, receiving loans from each of CNB's EB5 partnerships, and developments of each partnership. And Mark is the global managing partner and founder of Davies and Associates. His experience in distressed real estate finance with one of the world's 5 largest law firms, along with his extensive experience of investment visas, has made him the counsel of choice for many EB5 investors and developers around the world.
Everyone,
and I think this is going to be a very exciting session for everybody to look forward to. Over to you, Manisha.
Into this conversation straight. So Matt Hogan and Mark Davies, thank you very much for joining us on CNBC. Very quick question first, Matt, is what is CMB, first of all?
So CMB is an EB5 regional center. So we're a company that's authorized by the U.S. government to provide opportunities for foreign nationals to immigrate to the United States using the EB5 investor visa program.
When you say authorized by the U.S. government, how is it different from other EB5 consultants who are there?
Well, so regional centers, for all intents and purposes, everyone who calls himself a regional center has to go through the same process. You have to be able to put a form together to submit to the U.S. government that talks about your qualifications, the area in which you're going to work, the methodologies that you're going to use to generate job creation, and the general structure of your business, your operation, things of that nature. Once the USCIS reviews that application, they either determine that you're qualified to operate under the EB5 program or you're not. You can also submit these applications along with a project. It can either be a hypothetical project, meaning it's a project that, hey, if in the future we decide to take on opportunities under our regional center designation, here's what they would look like. Or it can be an actual project, meaning you've given them all of the information, it's a real project, it's ready to move forward, and you're asking them not only to approve you as a regional center to operate within the program, but you're also asking for exemplar approval of your individual project itself.
Again, so regional in my head is that you have offices all around the world, all around the US. What is the exact connotation of being regional?
Yeah, so regional as it pertains to EB5 is just them trying to limit the scope in the area in which you work. So when you call it a regional center, what they're trying to do is get you to pick a specific geographic region within the United States where your project is going to be and where job creation is going to be created.
Okay, fair enough. Mark, we are very upset. 900,000. What's going on there? But, I mean, so just run us through now the changed implications of a higher amount of money also limits the number of people, not just from India. I mean, China is your #1 country from where you get applications on EB5, isn't it?
Actually, that's changed. That's incorrect.
Really? Can you run us through?
So the number of Chinese applications has fallen precipitously.
Oh, that's after the trade war. Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, fallen precipitously.
Of course.
Most of the regional centers will tell you that they're running about 10% of the number of Chinese applications. Whereas the number of Indian applications
that's a sudden dip in business for everyone, isn't it?
The number of Indian applications has exploded in the last couple of years. So India, a lot of people think that India is the #1 EB5 country in the world
as of
right
now.
at this moment, as of right this moment.
All right. Correct. So, you know, what everybody was concerned about was the fact that, you know, your waiting time could actually go up now, especially with the rush of applicants that you will have before that figure goes up to 900,000. Do you see now the waiting period going beyond 5 years for EB5? What's your guess? I know that nobody has an answer, but I think this is something that anybody who's going to put that large a sum of money would want to know.
Well, one of the sort of confusions, I think, in the market is the US State Department put out a statistic of number of years. But they don't say that's how long you've got to wait. They perform a theoretical calculation that gives you the very worst case scenario, which now is around about 8 years. So I've been telling clients that probably the realistic range is somewhere, we don't know, but maybe somewhere between 4 to 6, 4 to 7 years.
So
that sort of type of likely waiting range. I'd note right now that if you filed a case before November of 2017, you're eligible for a visa immediately on an Indian basis.
Okay. Matt, what do you think? I mean, of course, we've heard some of the things that anybody from India applying on EB5 should be careful about. But from your perspective, what are some of the very critical things to look at before you decide which consultant to go with, which geography to go with, which project to go with?
So certainly track record is a huge consideration that everyone needs to take into consideration. Track record is important for a whole number of reasons. Obviously, you want to work with somebody that knows what they're doing. You also want to work with somebody that's been tested in the industry, who's been through the evolutions of EB5 and has continued to operate successfully. And so when you're looking at regional centers, you want to look at things like how long have they been around, how many failures have they had, how many successes have they had. What do they do when there's challenges on the horizon? Do they respond accordingly, or do they run and do the investors ultimately take the hit? You want to look at those things. They're incredibly important. But you also want to look at the actual projects that the regional centers are taking on and how they're structured. And not all regional centers are the same. CMB, we are not a developer. There are a lot of actual real estate developers that have seen the benefits of lower cost capital from the EB5 program and have started their own regional centers. Now, there can be certain conflicts of interest in that model. We try and separate ourselves from those developers. We actually have a loan model where we structure a partnership that becomes a lender to those projects. And we underwrite those projects similarly to a bank. If we don't like the project, we don't take it on. We're not tied to any developer whereby we have to take on their projects. If they're not a good opportunity, we don't take it on. And also, if something goes wrong in those projects, who's going to look out for the investor? If it's the regional center themselves that is also the developer, you got to be thinking, well, are they going to take care of their project, or are they going to take care of their investors? From CNBC's standpoint, our goal is to be, and our role is to be a fiduciary for those limited partners that invest into our partnerships. And so we're there with them through each step of the process to make sure that the projects go the way that they're supposed to go. Some other things, and one thing, and you're just talking about it, with these new regulations on the horizon, you know, November 21st, we're going to see major changes to the EB5 program. One of those, and the most noteworthy, is that price is going to go up. And so we're really in the final days of EB5 as we know it. And so there are so many regional centers out there right now desperate to try and get funding into their projects. Right now, it is especially concerning. There are a lot of people out there floating these high rates of return on risky deals, or they're pumping projects into the market that they never thought that they would use EB5 for, and it's just to try and capitalize on that short burst of demand of people who want to get in at this reduced investment threshold. So I'd be wary of that. I'd really look at that regional center, that project. I'd want to look at how it's structured, and I want to understand, you know, how is this regional center taking on this opportunity? Why are they taking on this opportunity? Would they have taken it on irregardless of this short rush?
That's very interesting, and I think that's extremely useful. So let me recapture what you've said. What you are doing is just being an independent consultant, but also for somebody who's applying for EB5, but you also are underwriting the projects from the developers, taking on that fiduciary responsibility as a bank to give the investor some comfort. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, that's pretty close. And so what CNB is really doing...
Are you putting your own money? When you say fiduciary responsibility, what is the comfort that somebody will get?
Sure. So we are the general partner of a limited partnership that every investor would invest into. So we pool that capital and we make a loan to a borrower. Now we've pre-negotiated that loan with that borrower. All the details of the loan, the underwriting of that loan are included in our private placement memorandum. Each and every EB5 investment is a securities offering. It's regulated by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. And so we have to be very careful. We have to provide full disclosure on everything that could go wrong in that project. You get the opportunity to see all of those things and make an informed decision for yourself. And so our role, once you've invested in that offering, is to be a steward or to be a fiduciary for that partnership. Enforce the terms and conditions of that loan agreement. Report back to our limited partners. If something goes wrong, we have to work on their behalf to solve anything that would go wrong.
All right. And the pool of funds that you put together as the intermediary for the real estate project, is it all of just EB5 applicants, or is there some amount of money that you get from US loans, US banks as well? Yeah.
So when you look at our investment partnerships themselves, those are 100% EB5 capital. However, they're just one component of the construction of the overall project. Now, in those projects, there will be other bank financing. Most likely, there will be some senior construction debt. There might be some other subordinated debt. You have to look at that when you're underwriting a project. You have to understand how leveraged that project is. And then also, very important, you have to look at how much equity that developer is putting into the capital stack.
So you do all those checks.
Absolutely.
Give us a ballpark figure in terms of what projects do you consider safe? What equity from the builder or the promoter do you consider as a safe investment?
Yeah, so they vary wildly. And CNB's structure, typically, we're looking to raise somewhere in the area of about 25 to 30% of the overall capital needed to complete a project. And we're looking for the developer to put in somewhere of about 10 to 15% equity into that project. There's U.S. banking regulations that require that developers put in minimum amounts of equity into their projects. And for the most part, we stick to those same criteria.
Same criteria, all right. So 10, 15 is the criteria. Any other, Mark, are you expecting, other than the number going up to 900,000 on 21st November, are you expecting any other changes in the regulations? I mean, what are you hearing and what do you know which we haven't already read about in the newspapers and news?
Well, there are some other changes in those rule changes.
Anything that we should be aware of and be cognizant of?
Just to reiterate something that Matt just talked about, which is very important, is project due diligence. So one of the things that the US government are also going to change is the sort of long battle over what's a TEA. TEA stands for Target Economic Area. So basically, what a lot of people in India don't realize is that the EB5 program's requirement is actually $1 million. However, if the project is in a TEA, there's a special exception, and it's $500,000. So that's, and then the complaint has always been, how do you have this great big project in the middle of Manhattan, right? One of the wealthiest areas in the world, probably. And how's that in a target, in one of these TEA areas? The answer is it's sort of gerrymandering and playing around with the numbers. So the government are gonna tie that up. So that ties into the due diligence thing, because when you look at these projects, there is no project right now they're changing the system for approving this. There is no project that's been approved by the US federal government, which is going to be the new mechanism for approving them. So we need to make very certain of some of the projects in the market. And if I just may enhance something that Matt said, this whole area of project due diligence is critical. I've spent most of my career in distressed real estate finance. You'll find that most of the lawyers in EB5 are immigration lawyers. And when you look at a lot of these projects from the perspective of, am I going to get my money back, there are some really severe issues in. So just to give an example of proper due diligence that needs to be done, Matt's team have a project right now, which is a custom build for a particular person who's going to rent the building. If you look at that kind of project, how do you know that when that thing's complete, that the tenant's actually going to rent it? If they don't, it's a bit of a disaster, really. It's a fiasco. Absolutely. So as a law firm, one of the things that Matt just allowed us to do is to review those leases on behalf of our clients. I believe that we're probably the only law firm that's asked for them, given what happened, Matt can tell you. But if your lawyer isn't looking at documents like that, then you're very severely at risk, and you're setting yourself up to lose your money.
All right. All that I'm going to say is that you warned people, which is very important, and you've told them what are the safety aspects to look at, and you've said that on CNBC, which is a national channel, saying that you guys do a much better due diligence, so it's captured for eternity. So, well, that's your surety of looking at them as for EB5, especially if you're looking at investing in some projects in the US, and of course going through the EB5 route. Mark, Davies and Matt, thank you very much for joining me today on this discussion.